What's up, everyone? Vu of Vu Films, and I am back with another idiotic video for you to watch. And today I will be talking about the new Sigma 85mm f1.4 DG-DN. DN stands for D's girthy nuts, and the reason why I call it D's nuts is because one, DGDN Sigma lenses are girthy. This is a 24-70 DGDN, and this is an 85mm f1.4 DGDN. And as you can see, the left one is a little bit more girthier than the right one and sags a little bit anyways. So the reason why is because when you have a Sigma art lens, you could walk around as if you have some very saggy, heavy set of you know what, because you have a beast mode of a lens on your hands, like I have right here. Anyway, so big shout out to Focus Camera for getting me this lens as quickly as possible. B&H, for some reason, where I originally pre-ordered it, was out of stock, and they said I wouldn't be able to get into another week or so, but I got this ASAP, and Max over at Focus Camera even shipped it overnight to my house, which arrived on Saturday before I had to leave for a wedding, and I got to test it out at the wedding. So shout out to Focus Camera and big shout out to Max. So if you ever need any camera gear, definitely give focuscamera.com a look. So let's talk about these nuts right here. This 85mm f1.4, and yes, I said it's new, but it probably doesn't seem as new to some of you because you've probably already seen like 18 reviews about it before mine. But I don't give a crap. Those are high quality reviews. This is a trash one, so it is what it is. So let's first take a look at the body, shall we? What is made out of? It is definitely made of some metal and some plastic. But as any Sigma lens, it is excellent quality, pretty much comparable to any Sony GM or even, Canon glass or what have you that you would consider like the best high quality glass. Along the body, you have some buttons and some switches. You have a custom button right here. You have an AF autofocus manual focus switch here, and you have a lock for the aperture. So if you lock it, you cannot turn the aperture. You can't turn the aperture at all. It's completely stuck. If you unlock it, obviously you can start turning the aperture. And as you can see, it clicks. Thankfully, for videographers who do that kind of thing, which I don't, you have a declicked mode. Nice and smoothly like this. So I really don't have any complaints about this body. Okay, it is small. It's smaller than the GM 85mm f1.4, slightly larger than the 85mm f1.8 Sony. And I'm not going to talk about the other third-party glass today. I'm really just going to talk about this lens and versus GM versus the 85mm f1.8, because those are the ones I've actually used before, I've owned before, but unfortunately I don't really get a chance to test it like head to head. But based off of my usage of the 85mm GM and the Sony 85mm f1.8, I'll just let you know my opinion on which is better or sharper or what have you. So you're gonna just have to take my word for it, but I could definitely link you to some other YouTube videos that pretty much compares the 85 f1.8 and the 85 GM versus the new Sigma DGD's nuts, and you'll see that my opinion is pretty much the same as theirs, but they also have results to show you versus me. I only have this lens on my hand to test at the moment. This is fantastic. I mean, it's not, the GM is a brick. This is a lighter brick. I mean, it's still not like a super light lens, it's still over a pound, but it definitely doesn't feel like super heavy, and it actually feels very nicely weighted. With here, I have the Sony a7 III, waiting desperately for the Sony a7S III. Hopefully it comes on time, and I'm gonna just go ahead and mount it to show you what it looks like. It is nice, has a nice size. It just seems to fit the Sony Alpha body very well. Now, if you're not Asian and you have bigger hands than me, you might have a problem with this here where it might get a little tight, and this lens is built somewhat sharp along this part. And so if you have massive hands, you may have an issue with these nuts stabbing your fingers right here. So that's probably the only complaint that I would probably mention. It doesn't really affect me. I'm just saying it might affect other people. But most importantly, I think, besides just the size of the lens itself, I think the most important part is the image quality. And this lens is probably has the best image quality out of all the 85 mils, just from my review and just looking at the image myself, but also just watching other reviewers. I've just noticed that when they compare side to sides, like this lens is like a lot sharper than the G Master. The G Master is known for being a very nice portrait lens, so I can understand why that softness is probably pleasing to some. But I think the sharpness and just the creaminess of the bokeh is comparable. The creaminess of the bokeh is comparable to the G Master, but the sharpness is a lot better. I would always prefer the sharper glass than the less sharp glass if I had my pick. But it also needs to have a nice look to it. And I think in that regards, the Sigma DG DN these nuts delivers on. I was able to test this at a wedding, and unfortunately that wedding has an NDA, so I cannot show you any clips. What I can tell you about it is it autofocuses amazingly. It's not a type that like snaps on, it slowly grabs. I'm not like super slow, but it'll slowly grab on. Once it grabs on, it tracks really well. I found that even in low light situations during like a reception dancing, it performed really well. Like there was no issues with it autofocusing. I would say it's very similar to the Sony 85mm f1.8, and I think it's a slightly better than the 85mm GM. And this is at using f1.4 aperture the whole time. But I do have footage and some photos I took of it with it of my daughter. And I feel like if there's something that if I wanted to test in terms of just focusing or just image quality, what have you, I feel like chasing around a toddler is probably the best bet, because it's really challenging to snap photos of a toddler running around. And when they walk, they're really unpredictable. So it was able to grab my daughter very well all the time. It tracked amazingly, and there's really no complaints on my end as a Sony user who has tried out many other Sony lenses to sit there and say, well, this lens is not performing well or what have you. This lens is fantastic. And gosh, like I can't find like a fault in how it performs and for me as a videographer, primarily how well it tracks. And if you're a photographer, like the shots I was able to get as my daughter just running around frantically, and this is all at f1.4. I mean, it grabbed her and it got the shot. So I can't, real world performance, not sitting there just like testing, walking back and forth and stuff like that. Like this lens performed admirably. And I think, in my opinion, if you want like an f1.4 85mm at $1,200 or so, if you might get a deal for $1,150 United States, $1,150. This lens is the go-to 85 for the E-mount system, which also makes why the Sony system is so much more attractive now, is because they have all the glass and all the third-party glass, most of them, and all the Sigma ones pretty much performs just as well or better than the Sony GM versions, and are usually less than half the price. So that's what Sony really has going for it, other than the fact that like their cameras are just beastly. The Sony a7S III is probably the best mirrorless video camera you can get in terms of just overall usability, codecs, all that stuff without overheating and things of that nature. This is amazing. Now, if you were to ask me right now, hey Vu, what 85 do you recommend me get for the Sony system? I would tell you the 85mm f1.4 DG DN these nuts from Sigma, which I am reviewing right now. 100%. If you are on a budget, what would I recommend you get? I would just recommend you get the 85mm f1.8 Sony lens, which is around like $500 to $600. You might be able to get it used for even less. So if you're on a budget, I think that lens will suffice. But if you just want like the best of the best possible 85 you could get for the Sony E-mount system, I would not hesitate to tell you to grab the Sigma DG-DN. DN stands for D's Nuts for Sony E-mount. Now, let's say, on another video I had said, hey, for videographers, this is the lens I recommend right here. The 2470 DG-DN. DN stands for D's Nuts lens. And why should you get an 85 if, hey, you could probably just zoom out to 70 and get a pretty nice portrait look out of it? Well, I think there is a couple of things here. One, this is an f1.4. And two, you get an extra 15 millimeters. And believe me, as an Asian person, that 15 millimeters is plenty of extra reach for you to get that additional compression. I'm talking about lens compression, so I'm not talking about anything else, in case you are wondering. I think this would be the perfect pairing in terms of like, this can be like the 2470 could be the main versatile, get all the best, get all the images lens. Like the bokeh is actually very creamy on this 24-70, and it is, it could be, let's just say this could be like your main lens that's on the body most of the time to get all the shots you can pretty much get. If I'm talking about like a wedding videographer's perspective, this would be a great lens to use like most of the day. But then if you want to get very artsy, if you want to get that just amazing separation, if you want to get that like extra just B-roll that gives your film that different look, that the ones where you're really working on the composition and trying to build a story with, that's when you whip out the 85 f1.4 and get like this super isolation from this lens, the compression, and just like this overall just creamy, dreamy look that you can only get out of like a telephoto type lens at a fast aperture. This is when you pull this out. And so, whereas this could definitely be the great run and gun lens, but then when you really want to concentrate on getting like that creative, artsy, storytelling type shot, this is when the 85 DG-DN comes into play. And obviously, if you're a portrait photographer, there's no doubt I'll tell you to get this. And what I like to do is actually, when I'm doing like the rare times that I'm shooting photography portraits, I like to go 35 millimeter and an 85 millimeter. Right now, the 35 millimeter I go to is the 35 millimeter f1.8 from Sony. Love that lens, love the size and all that stuff. So I think it'll be a great pairing with an 85. So yeah, guys, I hope this video was informative. I know a lot of my subscribers, you guys are probably switching over to Sony soon for the Sony a7S III. You're looking at glasses, glass to buy. And I think in the video before that I had posted, I recommended the DG-DN 2470 as my most recommended video lens. And if you want like that extra, like I said, if you want the extra creativity, that extra separation, that extra bokeh, I would recommend the 85 Sigma DG-DN. DN stands for D's Nuts lens. All right. So, hey, it's just my opinion. I know there's the Viltrox. I know there's the Rokinon, the Samyang. I know those lenses are there also. I don't know too much about them to tell you like, hey, go get those. I just know from my experience with Rokinon lenses, I have not been a fan. I've owned some before. I've owned the 50. I've owned like the 14. I think the firmware stuff is just a little bit like weird to do, to update and all that stuff. Like I don't know. I just didn't want to mess with it. And I'm sure the Viltrox 85 millimeter f1.8 is a great lens too. But like I said, just watch these other reviewers also, and they'll tell you with examples which one is the better lens. And I think the Sigma came out on top all the time. So anyways, guys, I hope this video was informative, and I hope it helped you make a sound purchase decision. Or if you did buy it, I hope it just reinforced your decision in buying the lens. And anyways, till next time. Lighten up.